Hello, everyone. This is Amy Hennon, the Director of Advocacy and Financial Stabilization at the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. MBLS and PBRC are putting this training on with the help of the Office of the People's Counsel to provide a lot of really good information about kind of what's going on with utilities right now. As I assume that many of you know, MBLS does a lot of work with both water-related issues and other utility-related issues. They're a real barrier for low-income folks, especially with housing issues. I'm going to let Allison introduce herself and PBRC.
Hi, I'm Allison Harris. I'm Director of the Home Preservation Project at the Pro Bono Resource Center of Maryland. PBRC recruits and trains lawyers to undertake pro bono matters of a wide variety across the state of Maryland. My project, the Home Preservation Project, aims to help keep low-income homeowners, primarily in Baltimore City, in their homes through a variety of mechanisms. We offer clinics and tax sale foreclosure, estate planning, and utility bills, and we find that all these things are really intertwined, and they all affect each other and can help find extra money in people's budgets to help pay their taxes or their other bills to really preserve intergenerational wealth by keeping homes in families. So that is our goal, and that's why we participate in these utility bill clinics that are so critical for low-income people in Baltimore.
All right. So I now would like to introduce Brandi Nieland, who is the Director of Consumer Assistance at the Office of People's Counsel, which serves the utility ratepayer in the state of Maryland. The office has a focus on community education, consumer empowerment, and regulatory utility policy. She's a licensed social worker who graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore with her master's in social work in 2009, and she's dedicated herself to advocacy and direct service. Brandi has an extensive background serving people with medical vulnerabilities and disabilities via her work with community-supported living. She's also spent time as a community organizer in Baltimore City, focusing around economic development and historic preservation. For a decade, Brandi served 211 Maryland, a United Way helpline, providing health and human service information, individual advocacy, and crisis intervention to hundreds of thousands of Maryland residents. Brandi has taught at the local, state, and national levels on a variety of topics. She was named top 20 in their 20s and is a recent graduate of the Maryland Leadership Class, and has had her work highlighted in print, radio, online, and television. Brandi is new to the role of Director of Consumer Assistance at the Office of People's Counsel, but her mission is to inform people of their rights and advocate for utility consumers. Brandi is extremely impressive. And so now I want to turn things over to Brandi, and she will take it from here.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Brandi Nieland, and like she said, I'm the Director of Consumer Assistance here at the Office of People's Counsel, also known as OPC. So I'll kind of reference back to that a couple times. In our time today, we're going to go through what is OPC, because I think it's a little unknown, COVID updates as it's going to relate to utility companies and our clients. And then I pulled together a list of 10 topics that are probably going to be most helpful right now as we start to get back into turnoffs in kind of this new world. This presentation, I assume, will be around 35 to 40 minutes. So if you can hold your questions till the end, if you want to pop them in the chat box, we'll absolutely try to get to them. And if there's any specific issues or specific client issues that you want to talk about, as opposed to the chat box, I'm going to leave my information at the end, and please feel free to reach out to me, and we can kind of walk through those together. So first, I want to talk about just a smidge of what we do at the Office of People's Counsel. So it is an independent state agency, and we represent the interest of Maryland utility users. So everybody here on this call probably. So that's going to include your gas, your electric, and your private water companies. So as an example, it would not include like Baltimore City Water, things like that held by municipalities. Now, our office is mostly attorneys, and they act as the Maryland consumer's voice in litigation with utility companies. So as an example, if BGE wants to raise its rates it's charging, they would go ask for permission, but OPC would be a part of that litigation, making sure that our best interests, the consumers, are at the heart of the discussion. So we do not provide individual legal assistance. Our office is more of sort of like a behind the scenes consumer protection agency, but on a larger scale. Now, we do have a small consumer assistance arm where we do a little bit of individual advocacy for your really complex utility circumstances and disputes. So many times that's going to look like us providing maybe negotiation assistance or acting as a default navigator in a critical medical needs program and connecting people with other financial assistance resources. So this service is really reserved for the most vulnerable and for the most complex situations. And then we also provide outreach, training, and education kind of like today. So if you hear something that I don't cover in full and you want to know more, please do reach out to me, or if there's an organization on the line that would like individual training, also please reach out to me. So kind of what's going on right now with COVID and utilities. As you may have known, the moratorium was extended until October 1. So that moratorium is over. And at this point, people are starting to receive turnoff notices and late fees. So this was extended through the Public Service Commission, which we're going to talk about in a bit, which means that this is not going to cover all utilities. So there's 5 rules, which we're going to kind of walk through together. But these are only going to cover your electric, gas, and private water. So cell phones, internet, things like that. These are not covered by these rules. And if you do run into complaints or issues with things outside of the electric, gas, and private water, a really good resource is contacting the consumer hotline at the Office of Attorney General. So the first one, as we said, October 1. So that's over. So right now people are starting to receive those turnoff notices. Just to list off a couple, BGE has started. I think they've sent out about 12,000 turnoff notices. I know that Delmarva Power and Pepco, I don't believe have started doing that yet. Potomac Edison has started and Washington Gas has not started yet. So we have a kind of a mixed bag of who's sending, who's not. Now, when people start to get those turnoff notices, normally they would have to have a 14-day window. So you get your turnoff notice and in 14 days it says that your power will be shut off. Right now, that window is actually going to be extended to 45 days. So that's where I think some people heard, no, November 15th is actually when the moratorium ends, but that's just not true because late fees are being accrued now for those that are not paying. So 45 days notice from October 1 is November the 15th, which is where that date I think that was floating around came from. So November 15th is the earliest date that someone could actually physically be shut off. But I have actually not heard of anybody receiving a turnoff notice on October 1. Like I said, I think they all started to kind of come out the beginning of this week, maybe mid last week. So number 3, and this is really important, for those that have been certified as eligible for the Office of Home Energy Programs, and I'm going to call that OHEP from now on, the utility company has to offer a minimum repayment plan of 24 months. So that means that someone has applied to OHEP and OHEP says, yes, you are eligible. It does not mean they put their application in. So there's a big difference there, especially because processing times for OHEP applications right now has kind of slowed down because of the increase in volume. Now, for those that are not income eligible for OHEP, the utility must offer a minimum repayment plan of 12 months. So if anybody calls in and they need help, they must give them at least a 12-month payment plan. And this is kind of a huge change. These kinds of terms are not typically available, especially that 24-month over there. So this is a really important benefit for folks. Now, if they go onto a payment plan, that means they cannot be terminated. So if someone is maybe in the process of applying for OHEP for the first time, I might tell them to call in, get on that 12-month, and then still apply to OHEP and see what they can get paid down. And then if they still need more help, to maybe call back in and request that 24-month after they've been certified by OHEP. Number 4, the utility cannot require a down payment or a security deposit. Again, a really huge thing here because normally when you enter into a payment plan, many of the utilities have requested a fourth, a third of the total amount due. And if you're looking at a $2,000 or $3,000 bill, that can be a huge hindrance for a lot of folks. So right now, no one has to put anything down to enter into a payment plan. And then lastly, they can't refuse a payment plan because you had previously defaulted on a plan in the past 18 months. Again, one of those things that we had heard about often that utility companies normally do. So I did want to highlight that the utilities are, like I said, sending out turnoff notices. Some are just sending out soft notices, just letting people know you do owe money and these are your options. There are PSAs playing on different channels. So Spotify, I know that they're going to start playing that out through the television, radio ads, bus ads. There is a huge utility paid campaign right now, kind of alerting people to some of these benefits. Now, they should also all be doing targeted outreach to folks for those that are going to be receiving a turnoff notice. So an example of that is I was chatting with BG&E, and right now they should be sending out OHEP applications in the mail to anyone who's going to be receiving a turnoff notice. And then also a lot of the local OHEPs are getting the list of those folks as well, those that are going to be receiving a turnoff notice, and they should also be doing some targeted outreach. So some of your clients that you might be working with might be being contacted now. So I do want to talk about, like I said, some of the things I think are going to be most important right now in terms of helping folks that may have fallen behind on some of these bills. And the number one thing is the OHEP grants. So if a client is behind on bills, just please always encourage them to apply for OHEP, especially right now. Do not wait to get a turnoff notice. When people start to receive turnoff notices, it's likely going to take longer to apply and get approved for assistance. Now, OHEP does have surge plans in place, and they have caught up on a lot of their backlog of applications, and they are almost at 100% staffing. But some of the issue is that Maryland is under a hiring freeze, so some of these offices cannot hire some of the empty positions that they held. So when people start receiving the real termination notices, it's going to be tough to say what the influx of the applications might be, and they're already starting to see an increase over last year in the number that are coming in. Now, the best and fastest way to apply for folks is going to be online, but I think we all understand that not everybody can do that. So if they can apply online, they can call the 1-800 number, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen there. Now, there have been a lot of issues with the 800 number. However, they have put some, they have tried to kind of make the 1-800 number experience a little friendlier. They put energy assistance as the first option when you call the 1-800 number, but the hold times are really astronomical. I called and I think I waited close to 2 hours. I also requested a callback option one of those times and did not receive a callback, so it doesn't seem to be completely reliable. The 800 number is also limited in what information is available. So they can send you an application in the mail. They can give you eligibility information, or they can refer you to your local office. Now, for updates on your application, you can call the 1-800 number and they can tell you, but you're going to wait a very long time. And if you do have access to the internet, I would strongly suggest that instead you check the myohepstatus.org. It's going to have the same information that the 1-800 number is going to give you in terms of your application status. Now, I would personally strongly recommend that people try to call their local offices instead of the 1-800 numbers if they do need the extra assistance. Now, if someone is unsure of their local office, of course, they can look it up online, but if they don't have access, you can call the 1-800 number, and there's an automated option where you can choose to click that, and it'll tell you where your local office is, the phone number, the hours, those types of things. Now, if they call their local office, the local office will mail the client an application, or they may help them complete it over the phone if there's no other option. And I did have a mixed bag with that. I did call all the OHEP offices in the state, and it was kind of scattered here or there because right now people cannot walk into those offices for the most part. I think maybe 2 or 3 kind of in the Eastern Shore and southern parts of the state had some options to do walk-ins or appointments, but generally most of the offices are closed, including all of Baltimore City. Now, none of the closed offices have any dates to open at this point. I think they're kind of playing it by ear. So if now many of them do have drop boxes though. So if people, once they fill out their application, they can drop off their application at the local OHEP instead of mailing it in if they prefer to, but they can also just mail it in and that should be fine. Now, if your client really needs the extra help in terms of applying for OHEP and your office can't help and it just seems like a bit too overwhelming for them, BDT, Benefits Data Trust, is a really great option, and their number is in the bottom right corner. So if someone calls that number, there is a little bit of a wait, I've heard, I think because of the closure of all the local OHEP offices. They can actually help people gather their documents. They'll have them mail them over to them, and then they will send it in on that person's behalf, kind of ensuring that that person sends in, a complete application. Now, the general rule for OHEP is that it runs on a state fiscal year, and you can apply once per fiscal year. So the fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30th. Now, many times the office will actually stop taking current year applications in May, and the new program year acceptance in June, with its first payments in July, typically mid-July. So if your client has been approved for OHEP, but it hasn't hit their account, it might actually take a week or so before the utility is notified by the Department of Budget Management. So those are the folks that actually pay out the grants. The utility typically calls this the EDS list. So once they have the EDS list, the account is then protected. However, the client might not see that money in their account for a few weeks after that. So if there is a hold in between, it might just they have their approval letter, but it's not popping on their utility account. It might just be kind of processing through the Department of Budget Management at that point. So what you see on the screen here are the new income guidelines for this year. Now these income guidelines change every year and they represent gross income, so before taxes are taken out. And when a person applies, they're actually only looking at the last 30 days from the date of application. So that can get a little tricky. And I always encourage folks to include more income verification information than less, because if you just put the 30 days in and then you mail it in, well, now it's 3-4 days later before someone's looking at it. So it's not 30 days incomplete. They look at pay stubs, benefit letter, wage verification forms filled out by employers. A person can actually even sign a statement that says they don't have any income. Now, they're not counting the extra $600 a week that people were getting from unemployment, but OHEP does cross-check the information provided from folks, especially on income, with back-end systems to confirm what was submitted. So if a client's main source of income is something like SSI, SSDI, TCA, TDAP, they will likely be able to actually look that up without any type of submission of proof, but it is always better to submit that proof if possible. So if they do have it, please submit it. I would say only in rare circumstances would they even kind of try to look it up on the back end as a way to prove income for the person. Now, there are some helpful forms on OHEP's website, so I do encourage you to check it out. Not the DHR benefit site. That's actually where people can apply online, but if you just Google OHEP, there are some really important forms like the zero income declaration form especially, that might be really helpful if you're trying to help a client kind of apply for this. And when a person applies, they'll not only need the verification of income, they'll need ID, social security cards for every member of the household, proof of residence, and a bill displaying the address, account number, and name. And there are actually a ton of substitutes, including some special substitutions for people under 25 and those over 62. And again, on that same website through OHEP, they have a very extensive list of everything that can be substituted out in case the person doesn't have some of these documentation items. So the number one reason for denial is issue with documents. So I tell all organizations that if you can assist a client in double checking they have everything before they send it off, the higher likelihood of success. Because if someone's application gets kicked back, especially right now with the high level of kind of incoming applications, I would be worried about how much that might delay the process for them. So I just want to kind of show this chart right quick. This is from an apprise report from 2017, so it is a couple years old. I do need to replace it because these numbers are basically the same though. I think while many people think that folks know about the OHEP program, only about 1/3 of the people who are eligible to participate in the program actually do. Right now, there's about $150 million sitting in OHEP for grants for folks, thanks to just the normal kind of money that comes in plus the CARES Act money. So there is money out there, but people do need to know that this is an option for them and they need to fully apply. So this is my favorite chart. I wanted to just kind of drive this home in terms of OHEP. There are 4 grants when you apply to the Office of Energy programs, and it's all on one single application. And you have to choose to apply for each grant. So MEEP, that first column, now this is a lump sum, and this gets credited to your account. This is the only grant you can apply for if the bill is not in your name, but in a household member's name. So I hear a lot, people are living together and then the person whose name is on the bill moves out, kind of leaving the other person high and dry. But if that person moves out, the person who still remains in the household can actually apply for OHEP, but only this grant. So it doesn't have to be in their name. Now, MEEP is really trying to address the current bill, not back bills for folks. The average MEEP grant last year was around $600. Now, EUSP, the next column, this gets split over the 12-month period, but you have to enroll in budget billing, and people don't love that. So if you get, as an example, $400, you'll have $34 a month applied to your bill. Now, EUSP is supposed to address what they call energy burden. Now, you've probably heard that no more than a third of your income should go towards housing. Well, no more than 6% of your income should go towards energy. But unfortunately, in the state of Maryland, depending on your income, people are paying between 14 and 30% of their income on utility costs. Now, the average EUSP grant last year was around $500. Now we have ARA and GARA. These are the retirement assistance grants. These are back bills. So you can only use these once every 7 years. So I always, tell people to be careful when you choose to use these. Now there are exceptions, so that you can use it more than once every 7 years, and we're going to talk about that. But generally, this is a one-time shot every 7 years, and this is supposed to address those built-up back bills. The average for these tends to be $600 to $800 each. Now, when we look at the chart and think about the OHEP application, you almost always want to apply to MEP and EUSP, but again, just stop and think if you want to apply for ARA and GARA right now. And then also on the OHEP application is a way that you can choose to enroll in weatherization for free. So weatherization, you would typically be called within 30 to 60 days after you submit your application. I will say that the #1 reason that people don't participate in weatherization is issues with scheduling, which is so silly, but I get it. But another big barrier is that a lot of our clients are renters, and for many of the products used in weatherization, the landlord needs to agree, and that's where it gets a little tricky. Okay, so my last bit on OHEP are some important timeframes. So OHEP timeframe. So once they get the application, they have 24 hours, and then it appears in that myohepstatus.org. So you should see that it's in there, and they should have reviewed it, and you should see what's missing, things like that. Technically, from that point, OHEP has 45 days to process the application. And in many cases, most people get a 55-day extension where their account is protected so that OHEP has that time to process. Grant time frame. So again, July 1 to June 30th, that's the OHEP cycle. We didn't talk about fuel fund, but that is once every 12 months. So if you got it in April this year, you can get it in April next year. And then the 7 years of ARA and GARA, unless there's a waiver, which we're going to talk about. Then we have denial time frame. So you have a sense of sort of what's going on with your application. So after you send it in and you see it appear in the OHEP system, they'll let you know if you're denied and why. They should send it to you actually in the mail. So then after that, if you have a denial, you have 25 days to kind of fix that. After that, you'll get another letter. And then after that, you technically have another 30 days before your case is closed and you have to resubmit a brand new application. And then lastly, we have the turnoff notices. Now, right now it's 45 days, but like I said earlier, 14 days is actually the norm for non-payment. They can actually give you a turnoff notice for 7 days if it's for fraud, like maybe you put maybe a family member's name who doesn't live in the household on the bill, or a child, something like that. Now, if it's been something like tampering with the meter, that they can actually shut you off immediately with no warning. So now I want to talk about the PIT waiver. Or the point in time waiver. So as we know, there are 4 grants and you can apply for all 4 of them at the same time. You can apply for MEP, EUSP, only one time during the fiscal year. But with ARA and GARA, you can apply for them later on if you need them instead. So generally when you need help, you can only submit one application during that point in time. But what if you applied to MEP and EUSP, but not ARA and GARA when you first applied, but suddenly you really need those extra dollars? So there are actually 2 exceptions where you can go back and apply for arrearage grants for those back bills, and they're listed here. They're very strict about these. So if you're at $301 or $802, you won't qualify. So they really are particular. Now, you must get a point in time waiver or a PIT waiver, or for the second qualification, it's called a vulnerable PIT waiver. This can be obtained through OHEP. So the best way to do that is to call the local OHEP and request a PIT waiver. It is a 1-page form that is filled out by OHEP, but needs to be signed by the person who's applying. Now, the person doesn't need to resubmit anything because they already submitted everything when they first applied to energy assistance earlier. And they can sign things right now through December 31st via a telephonic signature. So that is something only OHEP can do. They can actually help somebody sign over the phone to apply for this vulnerable PIT waiver. So this is just kind of an example I pulled together in case that wasn't clear. You apply to OHEP July 1, and have a $500 bill that you need help with, you choose not to apply for the arrearage assistance because you can apply only one time every 7 years, and this bill is something that you can take care of with the help of MEP and EUSP. But in November, you had a baby, and the bill suddenly skyrocketed to $3,000. I hope that doesn't happen, but because it was a very cold winter. Because you have a child under 2 in your home, you go back to OHEP and request a vulnerable PIT waiver to apply for arrearage assistance. So that would work out in that scenario. And just for those of our clients who after OHEP still need additional resources, the Fuel Fund and 201 are incredible resources to refer folks to. The Fuel Fund is often kind of step 2 after OHEP. People can apply online or call in. Now they must have completed, and that's sort of like we talked about earlier, not just turned in, but like OHEP has approved their application. Now, typically they would also need a turnoff notice when they apply to Fuel Fund, but from now until December 31st, Fuel Fund has waived the need for a turnoff notice because of the pandemic. And actually for those 60 and older, they've also waived the need to apply to OHEP first. So for anyone 59 and under, they have to have already applied to OHEP before they apply to Fuel Fund, but for anyone 60 and older, they can go ahead and apply to Fuel Fund now if they want to. And then also by dialing just 211 to get some information on other local resources, nonprofits, churches, other kind of special pots of money. They do have some of the probably the most accurate up-to-date information that I've run into. And so I would strongly encourage everybody to call 211 to find out other local resources. So next is the Critical Medical Needs Program. And this, again, I think this is going to be a really important factor as we move forward. A normal time to process the OHEP application is about 2 weeks, possibly more, especially as we go into this. But for those who qualify and apply to OHEP through the Critical Medical Needs Program, their OHEP application has a turnaround time of 24 to 48 hours. So this program started a few years ago, but it's really not widely utilized or known. So those that are eligible need to have a medical certification form filled out and signed by a medical doctor, a physician's assistant, or a nurse, stating that they need power because of their medical condition. Now, this can range from asthma, an oxygen tank, or recent surgery. It really should be kind of the most vulnerable folks, though. So those that if power were to go off in their home, there would be very serious medical consequences. So they would need to get that form filled out, and that's called the medical cert form. Now, in addition to the medical cert form being a vital piece to being eligible for the Critical Medical Needs Program, the form has a lot of other benefits. So if there was a turnoff notice in the home, it actually extends it by another 30 days. There are some extra protections in place for those with medical certs on file in terms of terminations. And if there's a power outage in a neighborhood, they actually do look for those medical certs and try to prioritize those households first. Now, to get connected, this is actually the biggest barrier for people who want to participate in the Critical Medical Needs Program, is that you need to find a certified navigator. So a lot of agencies who work specifically with vulnerable populations get certified as a navigator, and they're the only ones that can actually help people through this program. Now, there are trainings every other month for people in agencies that would like to become a certified navigator and participate in this process. In order to get connected, you can email me and I can give you the upcoming training dates, or you could reach out to Kate over at OHEP, and her email address is over there in the right-hand corner. She is the director of the Critical Medical Needs Program and oversees all of those trainings. I would highly recommend this training. It is free. It's 1 hour, and I feel like it's a very simple certification that does a whole lot of good when you're trying to process people in really tough situations. So next, we're going to talk about co-occupancy issues. I think this is going to come up a lot. As, unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of folks, unfortunately, evicted, and they're going to have to move in with other family members, friends. Co-occupancy refers to people living together, and then the utility company trying to pinpoint who is responsible for that bill. So you might say it's the person whose name is on the bill. And in some cases, you would be right. My electricity bill is my name. Should my husband be responsible for it since we live together, even though he's not the account holder? Unfortunately, I think, like I said, there's going to be a lot of evictions, and I think that question is going to come up more and more as people move in and then possibly move around into other households. So when the utility tries to pin a bill on someone who is not listed on the account holder, they say things like benefit of use. So benefit of use, the person benefited from the energy, so they are responsible for the bill. Like I said, my husband was here benefiting from the energy, even though his name was not on the bill. At the heart of the argument, what determines if a person is actually responsible is all about the intent. And that's kind of the thing I want people to walk away with when they're thinking about these things, when these situations rise, because I'm certain that they will if you haven't already encountered them. Because there is no hard and fast rule on how to determine who is responsible for that bill. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples so that you can possibly like glean when it might work in kind of other people's favor versus the utility's favor. So as an example, the married couple in a home, and then maybe a spouse passes. So the utility bill was in the name of the deceased spouse. The utility company will then come after the living spouse when they try to put the bill in their name. They call this, again, benefit of use. However, we want to actually try and fight these bills. If the living spouse can present the death certificate, the bill should be cleared. If the deceased spouse had an old credit card bill that he used to purchase his partner a fridge, would the living spouse have to pay the bill? They use the fridge, right? No, they wouldn't. And they should not be responsible for this bill either. So if there are two people married and one person passes and their name was in the bill, the spouse is not, the living spouse is actually not responsible. Now, another example, a grandchild moves into a home to take care of grandma. When grandma gets better, the grandchild then leaves grandma's home and tries to open up her own account, but they flag her. Grandma has stopped paying her energy bills. They say, well, grandma's name was on the bill, grandchild lived there. Again, benefit of use. But no, she would not be responsible, because at the heart of this argument and the biggest deciding factor is determining an intent. She did not intend to try and circumnavigate paying the bill. So a third example, a brother, and I ran into this one actually like a week ago. A brother and a sister live together. The bill is in the sister's name. She does not pay the bill. Brother and sister move together to another home and try to put the bill in brother's name. They are flagged. Now they would be responsible, because at the heart of this, their intent is actually to circumvent responsibility for that bill. So I know that's confusing, but I still wanted to bring it up. Each situation really does need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. You really have to ask yourself, are they trying to get around paying the bill? Because intent is key in these scenarios. In many cases, they're going to need an advocate to argue these positions with the utility company and to try and figure out proof of why that person would not be responsible. If you run into these situations, and again, you have any questions, please do reach out to me, because some of the stuff needs to be, like I said, on a case-by-case basis. Weather restrictions. So we're coming into what's known as crisis season, and I wanted to address some myths and some truths out there around weather restrictions. So during extreme weather, service shutoffs are prohibited on any day with a forecast at 6 a.m. of 32 degrees or below, or 95 degrees and above during the next 72-hour period. They then recheck every 24 hours. And if at any point during those 72 hours, it breaches either the 32 or the 95, that person can be turned off. So it's kind of a very thin protection, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, they have a few spots throughout Maryland where they consistently check from. For gas service, this limit applies in hot weather only if gas is used for cooling and you have notified the gas company of that use. Now, for winter months crisis season, like I said, that's considered November 1 through March 31st. There is no shutoff moratorium, and I think some people think that there might be. This is a myth. Now, they do have to send you a 14-day in advance notice. Right now, it'll be 45 until things change, though. And then they have to contact you 2 times. Now, if you have a medical cert in place, that does offer you some extra protections like we talked about, but even with the med cert, there are still instances in which they can still turn you off. 7-year rule. So this is a regulation that is listed in COMAR. I put the COMAR reg up there in case you ever need to quote it, and it states, a utility may not refuse service to a customer for non-payment of an outstanding bill that is over 7 years old. So after a certain period of time, the previous balance is essentially kind of forgotten by the utility, and they really can't enforce that you pay the old 7-year bill. Now, they can get special permission from the Public Service Commission, but they really do rarely do that. They also still could send it to collections, but again, they also really rarely do that. They do typically send it, though, to the credit agencies, so it can affect your credit. But if you run into someone who hasn't had an account for many years because they had an old bill that they could not pay, and maybe they've been putting it other family members' names or things like that, they do have a right to restart service without worrying about the old bill after 7 years. So the utility will still try to get people to pay this old debt. Whoops. Sorry about that. They will try to get them to pay this old debt. So you'll want to go ahead and fight and challenge these things if that happens. The best way to do that is to find out the date of the closure of the account that is 7 years old, and they really will count down to the day of when the new service can be started. It seems like this is kind of obscure and this wouldn't happen often, but oddly enough, again, I do run into this frequently enough, at least I felt like to kind of bring this up here today. Now, the only times the 7-year rule would not work, there's 2 reasons. Either one, unfortunately, the customer talked to them and they signed an agreement saying that they would pay it, or the outstanding bill is for service obtained through theft of energy or through fraud. So, or like in certain co-occupancy situations, because fraud and co-occupancy, depending on the situation, is sort of the same. So otherwise though, try and fight these bills if you do run across anybody with a 7-year-old plus bill. They should still be able to restart service in their name without having to worry about the old debt that was paid, that hasn't been paid. Speaking of theft of energy can be kind of tricky because if the company has claimed theft of energy, it's going to be difficult for the consumer to kind of prove otherwise. Theft of energy could be related to tampering with a smart meter, stealing energy from a neighbor through an illegal hookup, fraudulent information on the application. Sometimes people might accidentally or purposely leave the previous occupant on the bill, or never put the bill in their name, or put the bill in a child's name or a family member that doesn't know's name. So when any of these things happen, the account's going to be flagged by the utility company, and there's some very real ramifications to that. So like we just talked about, if they find you guilty of theft of energy, there is no forgiveness after 7 years. It's kind of viewed as a kind of like a crime. Now, they're not going to I've never heard of anyone actually being charged officially, but it is, like I said, it's not going to be kind of just looked past. The only way out of that debt is to pay the debt typically. It's going to be hard to negotiate. In some rare circumstances, if a case manager calls versus a client tries to negotiate on their behalf, you might get it reduced, but it's not likely, and I really wouldn't count on it. Payment plans are kind of rare in these circumstances. You're going to have issues with energy assistance. You cannot apply OHEP dollars to theft of energy. Once OHEP knows it was theft of energy, they will flag the account. Now, they can still apply to OHEP in the future, but they can't use it on any of those kind of theft of energy dollars. You can be shut off immediately without notice. So even if you have a medical cert on file, small children, equipment, if there's found to be a safety hazard or something, or someone stealing energy, they technically have the right to shut you off immediately. So sometimes our clients' bills are so big, they need to speak with a lawyer about their options, and many times those options mean bankruptcy. So I'm sure I've run into people who've had $25,000, $10,000 in utility bills, and there's kind of no way that they're going to probably dig themselves out of that. And so sometimes they have to think about bankruptcy. But in cases of theft of energy, bankruptcy is really unlikely to go through because, again, this isn't really a bill, this is a theft. And then it's dangerous. So tampering with electricity is dangerous. People will sometimes pay someone to change the way their meter is hooked up to the wires that deliver service. Now that person might know kind of what they're doing, but it is dangerous and it really could harm someone or damage property, and in many cases would not be covered by like homeowners insurance. So the Public Service Commission, I've mentioned them a couple times here, but I wanted to highlight kind of who they are and why they're important, especially now. The Public Service Commission is the regulatory body over the utilities. So with the new rules put into place that we went over in the beginning, these guys are kind of more important than ever. Now they set the regulations that the utilities must follow. So if the utility is not following a regulation or rule, you can technically lodge a complaint with the Public Service Commission or the PSC, and they will investigate and enforce that regulation. So you might lodge a complaint because there was an improper termination, there was no payment plans offered, there was the billing's wrong, maybe you were accused of theft of energy, but really you feel like you didn't do that. So you would file a complaint with them. So when you file a complaint, you really first have to speak with the utility before you file the complaint. They're actually not going to take your complaint unless the utility has come to a decision. It is really best to have that decision in writing if you can. Now, they're also not going to take the complaint over the phone. So if you can file, you would want to file online. But if you don't have access online, you can call them at that number, and they will send you a form out to you that you can fill out. When you're doing the form, you really need to be clear about your complaint. So what is the complaint? Why are you right? What do you want to see instead? You're really presenting a case here. You want to list everything you have done and every single person you've spoken to. Details really matter. And then at the end, when you submit it, it typically takes them, I want to say it's 4 to 6 weeks for them to come to a decision. And if you're not happy with that outcome, then you can actually file an appeal, and the appeal instructions for the Public Service Commission are on the back of the decision that they send you. Okay, retail suppliers or third-party suppliers. So these are the folks that you might have already met. They've been knocking on your door. They've been calling you, emailing you, or sending you direct mail, asking you to let them sell you energy. So these are not your BGEs, your SMECOs, your PEPCOs, or any other of the big name guys you might be really familiar with. Just a few literally random examples are Spark Energy, Direct Energy, SFE Energy, Smart Energy. There are anywhere between 40 and 60 of them active in the state of Maryland at any point. So there's quite a few. Now we do, before we get kind of into the supplier issues themselves, I want to just touch on how the energy gets to our doors, simply because I think it's important to truly understand what the supplier is. And I don't want you to worry, this is not like going to be a very super technical kind of walkthrough. So there are 3 major players that touch the energy that we use before it gets into our living rooms. That's going to be your generators, your suppliers, and your distributors. So the generators, they actually create the energy. There are generation hubs throughout the country. Just FYI, ours is called the PJM. The suppliers, they buy the energy that the generators made. So the BGEs, the SMECOs, the Delmarva Power, Washington Gas, again, the big guys, they're actually still known as suppliers too. They buy the energy from the generators to sell to us. Now the big guys, because they're kind of like monopolies, have to ask a regulatory body, the Public Service Commission, how much can they charge us for the power that they bought. Now, whatever the price is that the Public Service Commission decides is now called the Standard Offer Service Price, or SOS, if you ever see that on a bill. The retail suppliers, and like I said, those are going to be your smaller guys that I mentioned earlier. They also purchase energy from the generators. But unlike the big guys, the retail suppliers can set their own price, and that can be lower or higher than the SOS. Now, the distributors, these are the folks who are responsible for the wires and towers that get the energy physically into our homes. And since they provide the equipment to get the power to our homes, they also control the billing. So typically the distributors are going to be the big guys again. So your BGEs, PEPCOs, SMECOs, Delmarva Powers, again, big ones. So the generators make the energy, the suppliers buy the energy from the generators and sell it to us, the customers, and then the distributors get the energy to our homes via the wires and towers and send us our bills. So your distributor and supplier can be the same or different. So as an example, BGE distributes and sells me my energy. However, if I like the price of a retail supplier more than BGE, I could buy it from them. So I could have BGE as my distributor, but my supplier could be Smart Energy or one of those others, because I signed a contract with them to supply my energy. I would still get a bill from BGE, but some of the information on the bill would be different than if I had just gotten my energy from BGE directly. So retail suppliers are legal entities. They typically claim that their price will be lower than the SOS, the Standard Offer Service Price, that is set by the Public Service Commission, and that you should let them supply your energy. I will say that in a recent study done in Massachusetts, because retail suppliers are legal in every state in the nation, over the past 2 years, people that signed up with retail suppliers paid $30 million more in aggregate than those that just stuck with the SOS, the BGEs, the PEPCOs, the Washington Gases, who offer, like I said, the Standard Offer Service Price. They market door to door, over the phone, through email, through direct mail. And with more people home and struggling to pay their bills because of COVID, I think people might be more inclined to sign up with a retail supplier. I would encourage everyone to really think about that decision. Ask about variable rates and cancellation fees, read the contract in full, understand what you're paying for now versus what they are offering, and be careful and do your homework. Some of them are commission-based, and we have found, unfortunately, that many say and do things that are not legally allowed and can be deceptive. So they may say things like, we are already your provider. They may ask to see your bill. Now, there's a number on that bill called the Choice ID number, and I actually have some example bills we're going to walk through real quick. So if they get that number, they could actually sign you up without your knowledge, and this is called slamming. Now, they tend to have hidden fees and variable usage rates, which is very scary. because those nationally tend to be more expensive in the long run. So as an example, if you had a variable rate, what if there was a polar vortex or something like that, like we had a couple years ago? What if they raised that variable rate during that time? So it's kind of a risk. Now, if a client complains that their bill is suddenly and unexpectedly went up, I would strongly encourage you to look for a third-party supplier charge. Make sure they meant to sign up with a third-party supplier. Now, if they did and they want to cancel, they're probably going to be held to cancellation fees, which can be kind of high sometimes, several $100s. Now, if they were illegally signed up, you want to call the third-party supplier first and complain. My tips, honestly, because I've had to do this before, is just to be confident. Tell them what they did was illegal, and you want out of the contract immediately with no fees. Otherwise, you're going to lodge a complaint with the Public Service Commission. I would always encourage folks to speak to a supervisor when it comes to this point. And then regardless of the outcome, if something that they had done was illegal, I would still file a complaint with the Public Service Commission because they do review those often to see kind of who the complaints are being lodged against. So I just want to highlight a couple of these bills here. So this is just a BGE bill. Over here, we can see BGE electricity delivery. There are distributors. They're delivering our energy. And then over here, we can see, I know it's a little light, but electric supply. So the supplier. So my supplier is BGE. The electric choice ID. This is like your electricity account social security number. So I know you have an account number, but if anyone asks to see your bill, don't ever hand it to them unless you intend to sign up. Because if someone were to pull this number right here, they could sign somebody up for a third-party supplier kind of without their knowledge otherwise. And the same you can see down here for the gas, the choice ID. Again, here it is. This is Washington Gas. This is like, this almost stands for standard offer service price. But if it doesn't say this and it says something else, you could be signed up for a third-party supplier. Delmarva Power. This is your residential service number right here. And then you can see over here, look, standard offer service. That's what we're talking about. So this is, no one has signed up with a third-party supplier, but if they were, it would be over here. SMECO, again, standard offer service, right? So we would see something different here if it was otherwise. And Potomac Edison is down here. Where is it here? Well, it would be, oh, there it is, supplier generation. So if it were something different, it would be, the information would be right here. So lastly, I want to leave you with some negotiation tips. If people are behind on their bill, I do want, again, to encourage them to apply to OHEP and to try to negotiate with their provider. Right now, the utilities should be offering more flexible payment plans like we talked about. So everyone should be getting 12 months. There should be almost kind of no pushback on that, up to 24 months if they've been certified by OHEP. But generally speaking, I wanted to just kind of go through these as we move forward, and maybe those kind of extra protections expire over time. So make sure that people are prepared before they call, because they are about to go into a negotiation with someone who is prepared. So the number one thing I can encourage folks to know is having that reason for the past due bill, whether it's job loss, cut in hours, COVID-related issues, cut in benefits. Let them know if someone in the home would suffer a hardship if the power was shut off, like medical equipment, a newborn, a serious medical condition, something like that. Understand the amount of your past due bill. You don't want to be surprised when you call. Know your ability to make payments. This is also, again, a really important one. They're going to try and offer you, you can pay $400 a month or whatever it were. But if you really can't pay $400 a month, it's just going to default and everything's going to come due at once. And so you really shouldn't enter a payment plan that you know that you're not going to be able to pay. You have to, I would say, offer them something and offer them something reasonable. So if you're going to say, I owe $2,000, I'm going to try and pay you $25 a month, that's not really going to be reasonable for them because that's just too low of an offer. So just be thoughtful about what you're going to try and offer. And know if there's any investigation of fraud or theft on your account, because if there is, they will bring that up. Now, in certain circumstances, they do have the right to deny you a payment plan, and that's going to be the defaulted in the past 18 months. But again, that's being waived right now because of COVID and those special protections, but generally that is true. Fraud or theft of energy. Now, if these things don't apply and they still won't give you a payment plan, I would encourage you to lodge a complaint with the Public Service Commission. So in final, I wanted to let you know that you can contact the Office of People's Counsel for questions about any type of complex utility issue. Also for free training. So if a client needs assistance, please use the info on the left. And if you would like free training for your organization, or if you have a question about today's presentation that's very specific or something like that, you're more than welcome to go and email me. And that is the end. Thank you.
Brandi, I want to thank you so much for that presentation. I am going to give everybody an opportunity to type out any questions that they might have. We do have a question that has that we have, and then I also just want to let people know that if you're looking for Brandi's handout, it already is in the GoToWebinar drop down under handouts. You'll see it there. And then I want to just let everyone know that we are going to also be doing a fuller deep dive presentation with Brandi on third-party suppliers on December 17th at noon. So be on the lookout for the registration link for that. Finally, if you are an attorney and you have not already signed up to do our utility bill clinics that MBLS and PBRC have that we're doing together, you should jump in and join us. It's lots of fun and a great opportunity to really help some people that need the help. So I'm going to try to pull up this question. So the question that we already have is, can a person with no legal status apply for OHEP?
So that's a really great question. If they have like refugee, that sort of stuff, there are some guidelines around that. Generally, I would say no. If there is someone in the household, let's say maybe mom and dad don't have like a legal status, but maybe they have children in the home, they can. There is a disadvantage though, and I don't know who's asking, but I'm happy to send like some very detailed kind of information about this separately. But if there's, like I said, 2 children in the home and mom and dad, they can actually apply for 4 people, but they can't include all of the income information. So it is kind of a disadvantage, and they would likely get less, unfortunately. But if you want to go ahead, like I said, I'm happy to email some like kind of detailed instructions around that, who qualifies and what would actually happen to that person. But the answer is, if it's just that person, no. If they have children, yes, but they won't get as much as maybe they would if they had legal status.
Are there other benefits that legal status is going to impact? The fuel fund or?
So the fuel fund, no, I don't believe so. And in terms of calling, like I said, 211, as someone who worked there for a very long time, they do keep kind of resources for folks who don't have legal status kind of listed there. They are not extensive. I want to be completely honest about that. It's going to be harder. You're probably going to have to start looking at like nonprofit churches, folks that don't have maybe like ties to particular grant funding through like the government, stuff like that. But I mean, like faith-based is probably where you're going to start to see some more help. So I would encourage you to call 211 and ask about that and just be upfront about it. But yeah, so I would say I mean, there is, but it's going to be really limited.
Gotcha. The next question is, can you describe the process for reapplying or recertifying for OHEP assistance?
Sure. So for those that want to reapply, it has to be done every year. I know that's kind of silly, but it does have to be redone every year. So I always tell people, just July 1 hits, they always see a huge increase because everyone is reapplying. It would be lovely if they could just reapply parts of that, like maybe just to recertify their income, but you have to start the whole process over again. So I would strongly suggest that if someone, because unfortunately, you know, this whole program was set up as sort of like an emergency program, but because of the state of the world, this is really kind of helping people keep their bills down over time. And I think it's about 70% of the folks that apply to energy assistance every year are returning customers. So once you apply that one time, I know it's hard, but get your important papers folder out and save it, because you're going to need to reapply again. the following July 1 or whenever it is you like to apply, and just kind of update some of that income information. So it is annually based on that fiscal year. Now for those, now gosh, I can't remember if it's 60 or if it's 65 and older, they do actually send out recertification information to older adults, and I can't remember if it's 60 or 65, but they do automatically recert for those folks, where I think they only have to resend in a little bit here and there. But for the majority of folks, it's an annual process.
Gotcha. So the next question is asking for a clarification about the 45-day letter. Is the 45-day letter the date that it's mailed out from?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So once you get the letter, it'll have a date at the top, and then from that date, it should be 45 days from then.
Okay. And so I know that you said earlier that BGE is sending out disconnection letters. Are there, but you hadn't heard that, you had heard that some others were not sending, had not yet sent any out. Do you have, so what were the others that had not yet been sending out disconnection letters, or at least as far as you'd heard?
Sure. So the ones that I had heard that have not yet started had been Delmarva, Pepco, and I can believe I want to say it was Washington Gas. The other ones have begun sending those out, but again, many of these folks are going to be sending in waves, and for a multitude of reasons why they haven't started. Some, it's kind of behind the scenes IT stuff, like getting those dates to change in terms of turnoff notices, because typically, like I said, it's 14 days. Others have other reasons as to why they haven't begun to send them out, and maybe they have a plan to send out soft notices first. It really does depend on the individual utility. If people have specific questions, I would strongly recommend that folks just call into their utility and ask, and maybe just set up a payment plan now. Don't wait for the turnoff notice to come. But yeah, for right now, I know that BG&E, Potomac Edison have begun that process. And in a lot of those turnoff notices, some of them have been including, like I said, OHEP applications, or some instructions about, the payment plan options. So they are trying to do some targeted outreach when they send out those shutoffs.
Great. All right, I think that is all of the questions that we've gotten. If anyone wants to reach out to either me or Allison because you want to get involved with the utility clinics, or you want to volunteer in some other way, that's fantastic. Here's our contact information. We will be posting this presentation to the NBLS website in a few days, and so you can come and find it again if you're looking for it. And just again, I just want to thank Brandi so much for all of her hard work and sharing all of her knowledge with us. So, and thank you all for attending. Have a great day, everyone.